Welcome again to Hex Technology. We are going to talk about one of my favorite presentations that we've ever done. Some of the best research I thought was so eye-opening for us. And we call it All I Need Is a Clicker Wrench. Now, we start this presentation off with the three penguins. If you've hung around us enough, you'll see these a lot because everybody points to everybody when flanges leaks, right? It's the design, assembly, the gasket. Whose fault is it? So we start off presentations with this a lot, because we think it's funny. But the true presentation is called, and this clicker wrench, that's all I need, from the movie The Jerk, when he's walking out, all I need. He keeps picking things up to take out with him because that's all he needs. So we got a lot of pushback in our time in bolted flange joints about torque is going to take so long. Our turnaround schedule is going to be shot. It's going to cost so much more. What is this going to do for our cost? And so I took and I looked at, I asked a couple of our really good friends in the industry to give us their gasket procurement, right? So need to know what gaskets you're buying, especially in that B16.5 realm, right? To look at what are we assembling, right? You can look at P&IDs, but it's not going to tell you what you're actually assembling. If you look at the gasket procurement, that's going on in the plant. That's what you know what's going on in the plant. So most people look, and when they think of torque, they think of a reactor head with 3-inch studs, 4 5/8 nuts, slow hydraulic torque wrenches, right? Trying to figure this out. And, we're going to do tensioning, and that's expensive and everything else. Yes, you do have those. And I'm not saying you don't, but what do we really have inside of a plant? And this was really interesting for us. So what's the most common flange to be assembled in a refinery was one of our questions. Does it take longer to assemble a flange or to torque it? Now, that's an interesting question there. Does it take more time to pre-tighten a flange, stab the bolts, insert the gasket, align the flange, lubricate the bolts, right? Snug them up, getting them ready for torquing, right? Or is it the tightening? You ask most assemblers, and they're going to say it's all about the pre-tightening. That's what takes the most amount of time. So we thought that was interesting, right? And what percent of flanges really need powered equipment and all this specialty tooling and things like that? So we want to get kind of an overview. The whole point of this was to say, what do we have? It's an assessment, right? So our survey over all of these 4 different petrochem plants, there was 1 major chemical plant and 3 refineries. And here's what we found is the 2-inch flange accounts for 1 in 5 assemblies that you do. A 2-inch flange, 20%. Whoa. The other thing we found is that 80% of your flanges are 6-inch 600s and smaller. You talk to most assemblers and you say, what's the most common flange? They typically end up being in that like 4-inch 300, 2-inch 300s, right? But really what we found is 80% are 6-inch 600s and smaller, right? So in this one realm right here, if you notice right here too, like the 2-inch 300 and 600, you use the same gasket for that, even though they're different flanges. The only difference between those flanges, for example, is the raised face height. So, but the sealing area is the same. And so that's why that's combined together, because that happens until you get to 4-inch. Same with the 900 and 1500s, right? You don't know exactly which one you're working on because those are the gaskets you procured and they go for both sizes. But going back to what we found out, 6-inch 600 and smaller is 80%, right? Only 1.5% of flanges are 900 pounds and above. 1.5. So if you look here, half of the flanges are in this 150 range, right? In the 300, 600 range, that's about a third. But again, 1.5, we could not believe that. So we started breaking this down even further, and we started looking at what bolts could you, what flanges had 4 to 8 bolts. And that's when we were looking into bolting patterns, right? So looking at this, 80% of your flanges are 4 and 8 bolts. I care about that because that's not a lot of time for torquing, especially if you're using even the old school star pattern. For 4 and 8 bolts, doesn't take a lot of time for tightening that, right? The other one that we looked into was what could you do with a 600 foot-pound clicker wrench in theory? What could you do with a 600 clicker wrench in theory? We found out 94.17% of flanges can be assembled theoretically with a 600 foot-pound clicker wrench. Now, a lot of people will say we max it out at 500. That's great. We were just looking at this to see when we were doing our research to say, okay, that is a common tool that you find in the industry. What percent can you do? 94.17%. That is amazing when you think about that. Now, that also doesn't include, the low profiles where you're in a pipe rack and you do need a low profile hydraulic or something else comes about. But for installation on piping flanges, 94% is a lot. But here's where I really got excited. 82% of flanges can be done with a 250 foot-pound clicker wrench. Again, you might not have the room. There are some clearance issues, so on and so forth. There are clicker wrench people who make open-ended wrenches so that you can get into like valves better and whatnot. But come to find out, 82% of your gasket purchase for piping flanges ends up being 250 foot-pound clicker wrenches is what you can do with it. That is absolutely fantastic news because a clicker wrench is only 250 foot-pound clicker wrench, probably $200, maybe $250. My general rule of thumb, it's $1 a foot-pound for the most part on clicker wrenches. So you can use a 250 foot-pound clicker wrench to assemble 82% of your flanges, right? And again, no, powered equipment might be needed due to low clearance issues, so on and so forth. Or you might be using like the battery-powered pistol grip tools, which are really good, and it just takes some of the effort out from the individuals using the wrenches, right? So it's a lot easier on them than clicking all day long if you're on a turnaround. So main takeaway from this slide, though, is 82% of flanges can be done with a 250 foot-pound clicker wrench. We looked at the other different sizes and we said, okay, how many do you, 4.14% of flanges are between that 600 and 1,000 foot-pound, right? Where you definitely need like a 3/4 inch drive tool. So that's about 4% of them. The other one we started looking at is once you get to the 1,000 to 3,000 foot-pounds, it's a 1.8% that you need it for. So we typically tell end users, you should just rent that equipment when you need it. It's only 2% of the time. Typically, it's going to be on turnarounds anyway, and it's already there. So buying a whole bunch of 1-inch drive hydraulic torque wrenches or those big low profiles and everything else might not be what your plant really needs. You should focus more on the clicker wrench or the pistol grip tools that are doing a lot of the, up to like 1,500 foot-pound type of things. They do make them that go to 3,000 foot-pounds. So you could end up going there for sure and cover your basis. But not a lot need anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000 foot-pounds. So the last one we kind of looked at and we said, should we just tension those because they go over the 3,000 foot-pounds? And that was just a question, right? 0.26% of your piping flanges, pretty much max, is going to be tensioned, or you're going to need more than 3,000 foot-pounds for. So it doesn't happen often, but it could happen. So to round this out, we also looked at the bulk procurement. We asked our 4 different petrochemical plants to send us their bulk procurement too as well, just to confirm this. And this was really interesting. I would have thought 5/8 studs would have been the most procured stud size out of all the stud sizes. It was actually 3/4, which does make sense. There's a ton of these on exchangers as well. So this was just their procurement for stud sizes. It didn't have to deal with piping or anything else. It was what stud size are you using? And if you look, 3/4 is big right there, right? 5/8 as second, right? And then it tapers down here, which makes a lot of sense. So when you're really looking at what you can use, if you were going to go to 50 KSI 0.17, you can torque up 92.6% of your studs with 600 foot-pound clicker wrench. So it kind of goes back to what were we assembling, right, in the piping flanges. And we find out that, majority of the things you're going to do are going to be clicker wrench, in quote, size. Not that you can't use powered equipment, but that's the size it is. It's not in this 3-inch over here, really. Like if you look 1.5 to 3-inch, very small percentage of flanges that we find in petrochem. The majority are going to be in this clicker wrench area. So that was just an interesting study that we found. We thought it would be great to share it with you guys, just to show you what that procurement process or the amount of gaskets and sizes that procurement has, plus the stud sizes, to see that, you know, if you focus on reliability, you want to focus on the big stuff, but don't lose count of all of these little guys over here that make up leakers as well in plants. So if you have any questions on this, please contact us at info@hextechnology.com. Looking forward to talking with you guys again. Stay safe.